Welcome to the OEE Toolkit webinar. Today's webinar is focused on administrators and supervisors, and I'm excited to be here today, and I hope you're looking forward to the webinar as well. I'm Roos, OEE Toolkit marketeer, and today's presenter is Herman Gruigelaar, OEE expert and business consultant. We'll be recording today's webinar and we'll be sending the recording out afterwards. The agenda for today is that I will do the opening. Afterwards, Herman will talk through all the OEE Toolkit tips and tricks. You are very welcome to ask your questions in the meantime through the chat function. And afterwards, there is also a Q&A part. So Herman, please take it away.
Thank you, Roos. Third time this webinar, so I hope this will suit your need for information. Tips and tricks running the OEE Toolkit. Some of you might already know some of them, others not. So let's start with it and have the first sheet, topics. What we will cover today: the target groups, administrators and super users. We focus in this webinar on the tips for installation, the recovery, the functional enhancements, and support and tickets. And afterwards, of course, the questions that you can ask. First one, installing the software, mostly done by the employees of FullFact for the first time, afterwards mostly by the ICT department from the customer itself. Checking the functioning of the I/O module is often something that is needed after moving the modules, production line modifications, or moving the workstations. So checking the functioning of the I/O module. First of all, determine the IP address of the I/O module. The IP address of the module is by default 192.168.2.5.1. We provide that as a default, but after it arrives at your location, your IT department will change that to a local IP address. So determine the IP address of the I/O module and then start a browser within the same network segment, VLAN, or a direct cable connection. You can also connect your laptop directly to the I/O module. If you start the browser, type in the proper IP address of that I/O module, and if you're using a direct cable connection, make sure that you're in the same range with your IP address of your laptop. The pop-up that will appear, you have to enter the credentials to enter the software of the I/O module. And it's admin, both with a capital A. As simple as that, but you have to know it. Once you're signed in, the screen will appear. You have an overview, configuration, authentication. Configuration is the location where the network settings are defined, as well as the activity of your inputs. If you select on this screen the web HMI, then you have an overview of your digital inputs, starting at channel 0 up to channel 7, and you can check whether the digital inputs have a count. In this case, the digital input is 0, has a counter of 5, status is on. That means it gets a high signal from the sensor on this moment, and looking at the other number of signals that came in, you can assume that digital input number 2 is your production counter. So this way you can check whether your I/O module is properly connected and the sensors are properly connected to your I/O module. Quick setup of the setup database data. When you're installing the modules of our software, the first thing you have to activate is the setup database. When you install OA Blue or Remote Collect, it automatically pops up with the setup database screen window. and you have to enter the credentials that the software will use in the background to connect to your SQL database when you start one of our modules. This is the screen that will appear, database setup screen, and over here you can enter your credentials such as your username, password, the database server, and of course the database, the actual OE database that you are using for our software. Once you enter this, you press connect, and this software will make a connection in the background to your database, and it will store its credentials in your registry. Because it's stored in your registry, it makes it possible that you can export that section of your registry. So open your registry editor, type regedit, and it will appear. Next to that is the section where our software has its credentials stored, full-fact BV. Once you are on that section, you can right mouse click on full-fact BV and select export. Once you selected export, the next pop-up will appear, and you enter the file name and location where you want to store the file, for example, a desktop. Press save, and it will store a little file on your desktop with this icon. And this means it is an automatic file that if you double click on it, it will enter its information into your local registry. So if you've performed the installation of your setup database once, and you perform this procedure, it is possible to set up future workstations very fast by copying this file, webinar.reg, to your desktop, double click on it, and the setup database has been performed. Also very useful when you want to change your SQL server address or the default user. Set it up once in your setup database, create a reg file, and copy it to all the other workstations. Remote collect settings in a different location. We often come to a customer that has the default settings stored in the default location. Default is on the local computer, on the user environment, local user. When the user crashes, when the PC crashes, the information could be lost, and then it's more work to set up your remote collect PC again to get it functioning. What you can do is you can have the location edited where the settings of the remote collect PC are stored. There is a tab called settings. If you select that tab, you have the opportunity to enter the configuration file location. In this case, it's the user profile full-fact, so it's in my local user environment, but you can use any shared device, shared drive on your network to store the location data. So this way you can have all the remote collect configurations centrally stored on a central location, and you can put that into the backup procedure that you run on your application server every night. Starting remote collect. There are four different ways to start your remote collect software. First one is just start the link that the installation of remote collect created. After installation, there's a link on your desktop. If you double click on that link, it will start remote collect software. If it's the first time, and there has not been any definition yet, it will start up in the setup modus. Second one is add the /a parameter to the start command in the link. There's a small utility, shift scheduler, that will provide a method to define the shift schedules and perform them automatically. If you have shift change, you can define that on what time, what line, and the shift change will be performed automatically. Or if the procedure is to end the production, you have a different parameter that you can put in the definition file, and then that shift will end automatically. So the /a stands for automatic, and that uses the shift scheduler to provide you with automatic shift changes. /init parameter. That means that the software will start, the remote collect software still talking about, the remote collect software will start up with the setup module. So you are able to access all the settings from the remote collect, modify them and save them for new production. The /init and the /a can be used both together. First /init, you set up the parameters and definitions of the software, and when you finish the setup, the /init part, it will automatically take over with the /a parameter and will use the shift scheduler. Here's a picture of what it looks like and where you can find it. It's in the properties of remote collect, target, and there's the remote collect.exe, and the parameters are /init /a. Last one is after installation, there is a link in your Windows Start menu. It will not show automatically, it will not pop up unless you start typing on your command and search line for your Windows PC. Press the Windows button, type remote collect, start typing, and you will see that you have next to remote collect, the application, you also have a link to remote collect configuration. So that's the fourth way that you can start remote collect software. Recovery, quick move of a remote collect configuration. In case you have a problem with your PC that's running the remote collect software, it can be useful that the settings of that remote collect software can be stored and restored very easily. In case of the remote collect, the data is all you need. Let's first start what you need to restore a remote collect configuration rapidly. A new PC or working PC, of course. The current version of the software that you use. Be sure that you have the right version that you actually use and not some other one. Remote collect settings. Data connection system settings. And the location of those files is the remote collect settings are stored on the user's username full fact. And that's the same as we saw in the tab with the setup database, that you can store them centrally also. Location of the DCS settings, and that's in program data full fact DCS. Keep them on a central location and make regular copies of these files, because if you once installed the remote collect and you added a lot of buttons for the operator with different activities, it's of course useful that you save the new installation and the new setups of the files, because otherwise you will restart with the old situation. After every change, don't forget to restart the data connection system service. If you make changes to the DCS, the I/O module or the sensor, restart your data connection system service, because otherwise your system will not be running. Same goes for restoring the data from your DCS file folder. You have to restart your data connection system service. Your shifts and buffer. This means that one or more files related to shift data was not written to the database and the file is waiting to be written. What you have to do is you close down your active remote collect. So you just close it down, ending your shift, going back to your desktop, go to the folder C users username app data roaming full fact buffer. It's a long path, but in the end you can see this back on the movie we create on this presentation. So the folder name is long, but it's app data roaming full fact buffer folder in your user environment. Be aware that the app data folder is a shared one. It's a hidden, it's a hidden one. So you have to make it visible to even be accessible to it. In this folder, the full fact buffer, you will see a file like devcode, and it's processing, and you can change it back to devcode, etc. to .fullfact extension. When you change it this way, it will also be visible, and next time you start your remote collect, it will be picked up by remote collect and also written to the database in the end. In fact, this error, it's a failure of our software, will be picked up and will not happen again in our new release 1.3.10 that will be released soon. Not today, not this week, but it will be released soon. 1.3.10. Initializing hardware means that the connection between the software and the hardware, sensor and I/O, is not responding because the software could not initialize its settings. This is due to a situation that the old files have not been cleaned up. That means that some system files were present at running the system. When you enter system, it has to clean up those system files. Sometimes the system files are not properly cleaned up and still present on your system, and that prevents our system from starting up normally. Once again, to go to the user environment within your Windows, go to the current user, open the folder fullfact, remote collect RC backup, and you see one or more folders with a number. The number that you see corresponds with the number of the machine ID. So the machine that you are looking at for this folder could be 38 in your machine ID table. So the file that you will see will be a folder with 38. Open the folder and delete the bin file that is present. So in this case, you have the RC backup. I have two machines running on this remote collect, machine ID 36, 38. And when you open one, you have the possibility to delete that file, the bin file. Next one is the hardware failure. That means for some reason the remote collect software does not receive any counting of products or production signal. Go to your remote collect, go to the unresolved activities tab, and be sure that the hardware failure is defined with a name. Hardware failure, if you want to have the error message called hardware failure, of course, but be sure that you select the hardware failure. If you selected it, the name will be displayed as soon as the problem occurs. Minimize the remote collect or shut it down. Go to services on your local PC and restart your DCS service. This is the same as if you restore the DCS data as a backup. You have to restore the DCS service. Every time you do some action with your related to your DCS, you have to restart your DCS service. Functional enhancements. Use the option of saving reports in Remote Collect. In Remote Collect, the new version with the OA Blue, it's possible to save reports that were previously only available using your own PDF creator or sending it to a printer directly from your Remote Collect. Nowadays, it's possible to define where you want those reports to be stored, and it's initiated the saving from within our software. This is the setup screen of the Remote Collect. The first screen, press next. This is the hardware section where you define your sensors. Press next and you come into the general settings. You see one of the general settings is the reports, and as soon as you select the reports, it will pop up with a report setup screen where you can define which reports you want to save in what location. Of course, still possible to print both of them. It's a shift report and OE timesheet, Gantt sheet, Gantt chart. You can save the Gantt chart in the database. This means that it was stored in your database, local on your server, SQL server, And from within OA Blue, you can have a look at that OA timesheet for that shift. And of course, you can save them in a central location as a PDF file. You can enter the path where you want the local files being stored, or a central network location, a shared one, where you can store the PDF files and they can be accessed by everyone that has been authorized to do so. So that's very useful for planning, supervisors, management, to have a look at the daily reports for the different production lines. This is where the OA timesheet will be available. It's in the section of the reports, the last on the right. And then you can see the OA timesheet and select that one. It's an extra menu item that's selectable when you have defined that you want the timesheets to be stored in the database. Make use of groups within OA Blue. Sometimes customers have different departments, different sections within the production environment, and they don't make use of groups within OA Blue. And that's a pity, because it's a very powerful functionality within our software. What you can do, start the software with an admin role, select the top menu, select master data, and after that on the bottom, select the last item being the edit machine groups. And then this screen will appear. And in this screen, you can see on the left side which groups are present. All machines is always present, and don't delete them, let it be, it has to be present all the time. You can define your own machine groups. In this case, it's the cartons and the bottles group. And on the right bottom side, you can, when you select the BW cartons, you can edit this machine group and select the new machines that you want to add, or delete the old ones. If you have defined the machine group, in this case cartons, you can go to the users that you want to assign authority to do the reporting on the cartons for this example. You can also enter the computer name for it. Not commonly used, but if you are an administrator, it could be useful that you pinpoint the administrator to be used only on a certain PC. So then it's useful that you use the computer name for the administrator role, with the username report mailer in this example. This means that persons that have been defined, for example, the cartons group, when they start the software, it will automatically select the cartons group, and only those machines that are defined within this group. So this means that a person that has been defined for the cartons group won't be able to see the bottles. And therefore, the reports that he creates will only be applicable for the bottle group. So this is some kind of authorization and creating less noise, because if you're authorized for cartons, you don't want to see the bottles. If you do, you have to be defined for both of the groups, or all machines. All machines, if you create a report, it will include all machines within your plant. When starting OA Blue, one can select a machine group they are assigned to only if you are assigned to multiple machine groups. When assigned to only one group of machines, it's automatically opened, and only data from machines in that group is displayed and used for reports. So less noise and less machines that your reports will run to. People can belong to multiple groups, even with one machine belonging to two groups. One person can belong to multiple groups, but one machine also to multiple machine groups. So you have a lot of possibilities to define your own groups. You often see this on a wet department where the vegetables are cut and washed, and they go to the packaging department. That's a different kind of machines. So you have two groups, the wet and the dry section. Advantage: only data one responsible for is displayed and used for reports. We have less noise, as I already stated. And you can create groups and create one OEE for the total of the machines within a certain group and not for the overall of all machines. Don't create too many administrators and too many roles. Sometimes we arrive at customers, have a look and check if the sanity of the database, and we see some 15 to 20 administrators. This means a pretty big overhead. If one operator or one administrator wants to change an activity, this has to be communicated to all the other administrators, because if there occurs an error, an administrator has to know that activity has been deleted or renamed to something else. And you can assign an admin to a PC name for security reasons, so that the admin role can only log in on that certain PC. We have a question.
Yes.
That's Rose. She's sitting about 1.5 meters next to me, as we should do, and she was waving enthusiastically, so I guess she has a question.
That's right. We got a question. It's not for this slide. It was about the general settings screen. So I think that's a couple of slides back.
It is. I'll pop back.
And the question was, is the right part of this general settings screen new?
No, it's the OE123. And the OE123 is a setting that you can define in what kind of category your activities should be reside on. OE123, for example, TCU is the complete time of the when you have the availability of your machine, so that could be the complete year. And then we create a waterfall that other activities are not relevant to that situation, and then we take them off. We have a document of the OE123, so if you're really interested, it's a default functionality within the in the blue. Also already in Toolkit 6, I think. But if you're interested, just send an email to webinar@fulfact.com, and we'll send you the document explaining what exactly it does, OE123. It also shows on the shift reports what the percentages are of the OE123. Be aware that if you have defined this, it's a lot of work also to maintain this, because you're going into different categories of standstills, different categories of activities that you define and assign to OE1, 2, or 3, and your TCU. But it can be very useful to waterfall your performance and OE of your machine and production line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, fast forward, you go. Blue, groups, etc. Split up the web dashboard. That was the one. We provide you with a web dashboard if you have bought the license, of course, because we have to earn some money to live. If you have bought the web dashboard license, you're eligible to have multiple versions of the web dashboard running. You're not limited to one version of the web dashboard. And that can be very useful if you have, for example, in the last example, a wet and a dry department on your production floor. You can split the web dashboard into a dry and wet version. This means that you have two web dashboards that can be shown on the department that will be necessary to have a view on them. Also, the supervisors will pop up only the dashboard that they are supervisor of. So it can be split into several dashboards within the same license. If you have different functional production lines, wet and dry bottles and cartons, you can separate dashboard by creating a new one for each functional group. You're still bound to a maximum of 5 lines per screen. So if you have more than 5 lines, you can page forward into the web dashboards itself. But you can also decide that you want to have 5 on one dashboard and the next 5 on a new dashboard. Then you have something like Revolver, that's a plugin for Google, and that shows you different URLs in a specific order. So if you have multiple dashboards, you can have them displayed in a sequential order with an interval of about 10 seconds, 50 seconds, what you define within the plugin. If you have too many lines to be shown on one dashboard, separate them into more dashboards and rotate them in the browser with a plugin. Every dashboard gets a unique URL to refer to when you want to display them on the screen. So every dashboard has a unique URL, the plant dashboard, but also the line dashboards within the plant dashboard. When interested in how to accomplish this, same, you can send an email to office or webinar@fullfact.com or raise a ticket in our Fullfact Support Center entry at the homepage of Fullfact. Support Center, we have Support Center where you can raise your tickets, make an incident, but we'll come to that later. So if you're interested in splitting up the dashboard, we do have information about that. Using external BI tools for curating reports. At this moment, we have about 36, 38 reports within our system, but our reports are based on templates. All 36 templates are fixed. The only thing you can do is you can select criteria that you want to have displayed or not displayed or selected. If you want to create more reports, you can make use of external BI tools. They make it possible that you connect to an SQL database and select the fields that you want to display, and you can use procedures on those fields. So you can have two databases and the data that you want to use merged into one report. More and more tools to report out of the SQL data. Example are Crystal Reports, QlikView, Power BI, and Excel. Power BI is Microsoft utility, and Excel can also be used if you make your own tables within the Excel sheets. They all can be connected to our database, a special sector within our database that will provide you with the information that you can connect to from within these utilities. The special area in the database with the views, it's called views. It's in the SQL Server in our database, and the data that is available within that database within the views is equal to the data that is available in the normal OE database. But when you are connecting your tools, we don't want them to connect it to our actual database, and therefore we created a view section. Let's look. This is the databases and the SQL Server. Our database is the OE database, and there's a section called views. If you open the views, you get a list of all the views that are present, and the most important one is the collected activity data. The collected activity data gives you the opportunity to get data of all the shifts that are currently present in the database. So the data is, this is an example. Not all fields are shown up here because it's too many fields, but every shift has its own cycle ID. And in this case, you see that the shift with cycle ID 102 has several records. That means that there are several activities. Every activity is present within this table and connected to a cycle ID. So it's very useful for your own reports that you want to create if our reports don't fit within your needs. Support and tickets. As stated before, we have a system running that you can raise your tickets, fill in incidents, and that makes it possible for us to be independent of telephone calls and emails, and the customer can put in its own records in there. It's accessible from our homepage, Full Fact Support Center on the top right. When you select this, it's asked to sign in for yourself with an email address. The email address is stored and is used as a part of the authentication, and is also the way that we can find back reported issues. This is the screen that will open when you have signed on. The Full Fact Support Center and Toolkit Help Desk. Report an incident, get help, suggest improvement, and other questions. Very easy. Not a big deal to do so, but very easy for both sides, for the customer and for us, to keep track on incidents. Why using the service portal? We prefer that you submit a ticket instead of an email or phone call, because our service portal is always available. Sometimes we're not available to pick up the phone. We're at the customer, we're not reading our email, but the service portal is always manned. Overview of remarks and actions related to the incident. All remarks and actions are stored within the incident. So if you raise an incident, a ticket, and you look at the ticket after a few times, you should see some actions and remarks related to the incident. Also, feedback from within the service portal to the customer is stored within the incident. Proper notifications within the system. If a system has a ticket, level 1, it has to be escalated to level 2, you get a notification of it. Organizational-wide if necessary. When you raise a ticket, you can define that your complete organization, and the complete organization means that all the persons that are available within our system, the user service portal, with the same domain name, user domain name. So if you select that it should be organizational-wide distributed, the information about this ticket, you can select that, and all persons within the same domain will receive information about the ticket, the updates, and so on. There's also an online help and knowledge base within the system. It's pretty new, very young. We're filling it at the moment. It's very easy to use. You go to the portal again. This one, on top right, there's a search glass. Select the search glass and the line will appear saying find help and services. And on that line, just start typing. In this example, I start typing with Shift Scheduler, and it pops up with 3 possible articles, how to use, what are the different antivirus. The Shift Scheduler itself, if you select this, how to use the Shift Scheduler, it will pop up with a document, with a link, or even with a small instruction video on how to use the Shift Scheduler. In this case, there's actually a small instruction video available on how to use the Shift Scheduler. So if you have any questions or want information about something, just go into the knowledge base and it might help you in advance. So this was the webinar for my theory and presentation. It was a short one. Our system is very obvious and very clear, I think, so the tips and tricks are not that much, but I hope they are very useful. And Rose, do we have some questions?
I have some questions.
Nice.
The questions are the ones we received earlier.
Okay.
So if anybody who's online has some questions up their sleeve, please post them now in the Q&A. We're waiting for you. But I'll ask you another question. So could you tell us something about best practices in reporting against minor stops?
Minor stops are the biggest surprise for every new customer. Minor stops, the stops that you don't register normally. They happen and they disappear and you notice them, but you don't remember them. And the best practice is that you determine how long you accept that a short stop has lasted. If you accept that it lasts 10 seconds, then you have to define, we have two thresholds within our system in Remote Collect. The first threshold is about 10 seconds. So everything within 0 and 10 seconds will not be registered. It's so little, there's no improvement to achieve, so we forget the first 10 seconds. After that, the second threshold is between 10 seconds and let's say 2 minutes. That means within 10 seconds and 2 minutes, we register, it's a short stop, short idle. We register the duration and the number of occurrences. And after the 2 minutes, the system decides that it's has a standstill too long and wants to know why it has a standstill. And that's the point where you get your information for your improvements. If you have too many short idles and too little information about the standstills, you can reduce the time from 2 minutes to, let's say, 1 minute. So in that case, you have only short idles from 10 seconds to a minute. And from then on, the system demands that an operator fills in the reason for the standstill. So that's how we manage the short idles, and they are available if you look at the reporting of your Blue. They are available as an activity within the availability that you see on the left side of your screen within OA Blue. I hope this answers the question.
I like your answer. Anyway, I have another one, and that is, can you tell us more about how to archive old product codes?
If you're running the system for quite some time, you might have products that are no longer applicable to your system, are no longer produced, and then you don't want to see them in the selection list for the operator. Therefore, there's one column in the definition of the products where you can put the product on a different state. Normally it's active, but you can also hide it and make it inactive. That way it won't be visible for the operator to select. It will still be available in the system for reporting purposes because it's historical data. That could always be very valuable for in the future to have reports run on data from the past. So within the definition of the product, there's a tab available for putting the product in a hidden status. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us also more about data handling on servers?
Data handling on servers, I presume that means the SQL Server data. Our data is stored in 3 different databases on the SQL Server. The one is the OA Blue, that's the main database. Then we have the DCS database, that's the location where we make a connection between the I/O module sensors and our software. And the third one is the OA Blue Web Dashboard database. Those 3 databases are stored in the SQL Server and are necessary to run our software. The size of the databases is pretty small. Compared to other software packages, it's very small. When you're running 5 lines, don't count more than 2 gigs in the end for storing data for several years. So it's pretty small qua volume. The data is written once the shift ends. So if you're stopping the shift or you're having a shift change, the data is written to the database, not during the shift. So that could be time critical if you have a lot of lines and they are all writing the same data to the same database, to the same tables. That could be some stressful for the SQL Server. We don't have encountered much problems with that, but we do have a customer that had problems, and we suggested that they have the shift change 2 minutes before exactly on and 2 minutes after, and divided that between all the machines they are running at the moment. So that's something about the data load on the SQL Server.
Okay. I have another challenging question.
Oh, I like that.
Yes. It's about communication problems between devices.
Yes. That's very interesting because that's a very broad question.
It is. Okay.
Communication issues between devices. I don't know what devices that are meant, but measuring the OEE, we do that on the production line. We don't measure machines within the production line. So actually, communication between the filler and the packer and the palletizer and the capper, and we don't measure them in between. We only measure the complete production on the line because we want to know the effectiveness of the production line and not of the machines separately. So I can't place the question very well. So I just continue for other hardware and other problems eventually, but another communication is the one I mentioned in the beginning of the I/O module. The sensor is connected to the I/O module and is done by the local technical department, and there is a limit of 30 meters. There's a limit of 30 meters of the sensor to our I/O module. From there on, the I/O module is connected to the network using an Ethernet connection, and then over the network using VLAN switches, etc. It's accessible by our software on the Remote Collect PC, which is also connected with Ethernet connection. So that's the connection. DCS is a local software. It's also looking in the DCS database when the software is starting up. So there has to be a connection too. And that's pretty much all the connections that we have. We have several port addresses that we need and have to be defined in the firewall. So that's pretty much all about connectivity I can think of.
Okay. Well,
but if the person wants more information, yes, of course he's free to raise a ticket or send an email to myself or no, not an email. We just stated that we would like to have an incident within the service pod. So raise a ticket, please.
Okay, I have two final questions. One is, do you have any tips for reporting?
Yes. Take an hour and have a look at them. Don't use them all. Most of the time, you use only for your function, you use only 7, 8, maximum 9, 10 of the reports, and not all of the 38 that are present. And get acquainted how they work. They have a standard default layout, a template, and by selecting criteria at the bottom of the page, you can decide what you want to have present in your report, what you want to see. So that's pretty much the most important advice is spend some time just looking at what is all present and not when you need one. Other suggestion is that you have access to the views in the database. It's very nice to have a look at, because if you have an SAP system that has data in SQL format, you can merge those two information about producing products with the production lines using our views and the order numbers and the stock that you have within your SAP. You combine them in one report if you want to. So first of all, have a look at our data and our reports and which one you would like to use. But furthermore, have a look at the new BI tools that are present in the market at this moment. They are very easy to use if you're acquainted with them.
Okay.
Last one.
Last one.
Yes.
Yes. We just talked about the tips for reporting. And now the final question is, do you have a tip for determining the target speed?
Yes. The target speed, what we have is the standard. The standard is the speed that the product runs on that certain machine. And the only way to determine the standard is to have a count on while you have optimum conditions. So you have an optimum running machine, perfect weather outside, nice temperature inside, everybody's present, and then start the production and just count them. Have a stopwatch and count how many products that pass by during 2 minutes, or depending on the number of products and the speed of products, but just count them and make that the first standard. And that then after, it's not static. You can change it if you need to, but when you change the speed of a product, you get a pop-up if you really want to change it, and if you want to change it for the complete history of your data. And that's logical, because if you have calculated a product with a speed of 100, and then you find out that the speed should have been 90, it's also useful that the history is adjusted with the speed of 100 to the new speed for proper reports that you can look up in the future.
Okay. Well,
that's
thank
pretty much.
you.
Yes.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much, Herman, for taking the time to explain everything and giving our OEE Toolkit users tips and tricks on how to use the software better. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope to speak to you all the next time. And thank you, Herman.
You're welcome. Thank you for the audience, and goodbye.